Here is the Chapter 4 PowerPoint for this week. Sorry it's late. We will be discussing these things. All right, let's discuss some memory basics. Memory is like a filing system. You put in the information, it gets processed, and then you can retrieve the files as needed, just like in a computer. Encoding is the process of inputting data into that system. Memory traces are stored code representing the information put in. It's just our memories in layman's terms. Storage is where we put memories in the brain. We save information into files on our computer, and then we can use retrieval, which is the act of accessing the information, like pulling it out of files or opening a file on a computer. Consciousness plays into this entire pathway of encoding, memory traces, storage, and retrieval. It's our awareness of our own mental processes. It makes us different in this way from the rest of the animals. Sometimes we're conscious of information we're pulling out, like when we try to remember where we put our car keys, but sometimes we aren't conscious of it, like recognizing a color or shape. These are called explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory is the conscious use of memory, and implicit memory is the unconscious use of memory. Okay, note card time. There's a lot in this chapter, by the way. First key point, explicit, implicit memory. On the back side, please write conscious versus unconscious, and you can even mark which one is which. All right, let's look at the three-stage memory model. Traditional view of memory with the 3 levels of storage. So we're going to break down those levels in the next few slides, but keep in mind as we start discussing this memory model that it has some support from studies. All right, let's talk about the serial position curve. The serial position curve shows the rates that we remember things. Not all things have an equal chance of being remembered. We remember things we first hear and the last things we hear, typically. This is because we keep first things in our short term by repeating, and while we do that, we miss out on storing more incoming information. By the time we get to the end, those first things have made it into the long-term memory, and then the most recent things we've heard make it into short-term memory and can be processed. So think of like when you meet someone and you are working really hard to remember their name, so you are repeating it, maybe consciously, maybe not consciously, but in your head you're trying to store that information, and so you are forgetting maybe to listen to the rest of what they're saying. It also happens when you're studying and you're trying to take notes, then you're concentrating so much on writing the first important thing that you hear that it's hard to remember the rest of it. All right, another note card. And the key point on this one is sensory memory. And on the back side, please write first stage of memory storage. All right, sensory memory consists of sights and sounds as well as other senses. Generally, we think of sight and sound because they bring in the most memory that we're aware of. Sensory memory is extremely short term. It's just long enough to process it and send it on to the next level. We have no control over this, and we just gather information and transmit. What gets passed along and what gets tossed is dictated by attention. If we pay attention to something, it goes on to short term or even long term. If we ignore it, out the window it goes. For example, we hear white noise, but we don't pay attention to it, so it gets tossed. When we space off listening in class, we say in one ear and out the other, which is essentially what is happening. If we pay attention to it, it gets processed further. So when we watch a movie, we take in what is shown and listen and save it so we remember what it was about and we remember the characters later. All right, short-term memory. It uses a dual coding system, which means that memory is stored in more than one type of format. So that's visual and sound, typically. Like sensory memory, can't put much in. It has a limited capacity and duration. So George Miller studied that the capacity of short-term memory has a 7 plus or minus 2 things. So if I give you a random list of 10 things, chances are good you will remember at least 7 plus or minus 2. So that's anywhere from 5 to 9. So we remember more things by chunking. So think about like phone numbers. We chunk it into, the first 3 digits, the second 3 digits, and then the last 4 digits. Also, your social security number or credit card numbers, they're automatically chunked for you. So your credit card numbers are in like 4-digit chunks. Your social security number has 3 digits, 2 digits, 4 digits. It's a lot easier to remember that than if it was just a string of numbers. And also, there's something called maintenance rehearsal, which is saying something over and over again to keep it refreshed in your short-term memory. So that's like the name thing. In your head, you're saying it over and over again so you can remember somebody else's name. All right, on this note card, we're going to write George Miller's memory capacity. And again, everything on the note cards are on the test. So it's a good idea to really get these things down. On the back side, you're going to write the capacity is 7 plus or minus 2. So again, that's 5 to 9 things. All right, let's talk about long-term memory. So long-term storage memory is where information that is kept and processed remains. So this is where we keep it all. How do we get it there from the short term though? Mere repetition does not really do the trick. So we need a deeper level of understanding. That's when we do elaborative rehearsal, which is forming associations and connections between the new information and previously stored information. So this could be like linking a phone number to music, or it could be, well, that's how I taught my son how to spell his name, by putting it to a song. So that way it's always in his head. Also, when I take notes, in order to remember things, I do a lot of connecting to the text. So that means that I will write down in my book things like, oh, this reminds me of when blah, blah, blah. So that way, whenever I think of what it reminds me of, I now have linked it to the whatever it is in the text that I was taking notes on. All right, and then there's the levels of processing model. Levels of processing model says that information is processed more deeply and is retained and recalled better. So the deeper it's processed, the better it's retained and the easier it is to recall later. So don't just regurgitate things, which is hard because I know that that's kind of what school is all about, especially this kind of class where it's where you're going at a very high rate of speed in your learning. So if you want to make what you learn pertinent to you, just really find a connection and apply it, and then you'll be more likely to remember everything. We know all this, and we know the support, but there's some belief that it's not supported because even when you use short term, your brain is recalling long term. We can remember 7 words, but to pronounce them or say them, we're actually using information from long-term memory. On this note card, we will be writing elaborative rehearsal. And on the back side, it will be associating new and already stored information. So you're kind of creating a bridge between new information and stored information to help all the new information become stored. So the major argument against the 3-stage memory model is that it's very ordered. So it's one stage first and then on to the next, but we pull from multiple areas at once. So this theory solves that issue. So this is the working memory model. Working memory model states that it has long-term memory and other components that work in parallel with each other. Working memory So short-term memory briefly stores information that is currently being used. And then we've got the central executive model, which is attention controlling part of working memory. It coordinates information coming in from the listed two systems and integrates that information. So the two systems are just the ones that bring in auditory and visual information. So that's your phonological loop and your visuospatial sketch pad. All right, on this note card, you'll be writing working memory. And on the back side, moving info in and out of long-term memory and different aspects at the same time. Long-term memory is included in both theories. So remember when we talked about elaborative rehearsal, where you tie in new information to something you already know and make connections? So schema is a generalized knowledge structure. It's a general category that we fit information into, like a file that we put in subcategories. We have two types of long-term memory. Procedural, which is memory for skills that can't really be put into words, kind of like riding a bike or tying your shoes. Declarative, which is explicit memory for knowledge that can be easily verbalized. Then that's broken into two. Semantic memory is known for facts and concepts. And then episodic is knowledge for events in one's own life. So that's your personal experiences, and think about when you're telling a story about yourself. You're using your episodic memory. We often use semantic encoding to store the gist or the meaning of something that's coming in. We're aware of using declarative memory, but often the procedural side is unconscious. All right, on this note card, we'll be writing episodic long-term memory. And on the back, it's explicit and it's about your life. All right, we're going to talk now about forgetting things. So amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is when you can't recall previously stored information, but you can store new information. So that's really common with concussion, for example. People can remember what happened, but they can't remember what happened, but there's no issue storing new information. Then there's anterograde amnesia. That's when you can't store any new information. So that's like the movie 50 First Dates. That's what Drew Barrymore's character has. She can't store anything new, and every time she goes to bed, her new memories are kind of wiped clean. Common causes of anterograde amnesia are injury and illness. So there's also a clip that I put on YouTube of 10 Second Tom from the movie 50 First Dates. And 10-second Tom can only hold information in his short-term memory for 10 seconds. All right, on this note card, please write retrograde amnesia. And on the back side, no recall of previous, but can store new. And another note card, anterograde amnesia. On the back side, can't store new info. All right, we're going to talk about retrieval of information. So recall is a limited probe to retrieve other information, and it's often pretty difficult. Recognition is an extensive probe, and it is often the easiest. The decay theory is basically use it or lose it. Proactive interference is old info blocking new info that's being pulled. Retroactive interference is new info blocking old info being pulled. Cue dependent is like walking through a doorway into a room and forgetting why you went in. So I call that destinesia, because you are going to a destination and then you forget. But cue dependent is when you go back, retrace your steps, and then you suddenly remember. Repression, and this is the Freudian idea, but it's pretty accurate here, is forgetting. Repression is forgetting horrible events because we are not ready to deal with them. So this is a very controversial idea, and they're not exactly sure why some people repress memories and why some others don't. So it's something that they're still kind of looking into. On this note card, please write recognition. And on the back side, extensive probe. And it's often the easiest way to retrieve a memory. Another note card, decay theory. And this is the use it or lose it memory. Another note card, cue dependent forgetting. On the back side, recall best where information is learned. So that's walk, forget, back up, and remember. All right, let's discuss memory accuracy. So flashbulb memory is a detailed memory about a significant event that may or may not be accurate. And that can happen a lot due to trauma. So think about the people recalling 9/11. A lot of them have the gist of the information, but they might have false memories. Emotional stress can prevent an event from being properly encoded and therefore properly recalled later. So if you've ever been mugged or held up or something traumatic, if you've ever been attacked, you know that later when you're talking to the police and they're making you write down exactly what happened and you're working with a sketch artist, your memory is not necessarily very accurate because it was not being properly encoded. So memory isn't instant replay, but it's more of a reenactment because you remember, the gist of what happened and then little bits kind of fall into place. Memory can be manipulated simply by altering the cues used to recall information. You can alter what is reconstructed, and this can lead to having a false memory. So if you want to watch this clip here, I'll add it to our YouTube links, but basically it talks about that very thing of, the police were working with somebody that had a crime committed, and they gave a sketch to the police and a description of what the man looked like, and it turned out to be very different from what the actual perpetrator looked like. All right, memory biology. This is a quick one and then we're done. So here we have our lovely brain. So think about 10-second Tom, who had anterograde amnesia, so he couldn't form any new memories after 10 seconds. So we see that the hippocampus is absolutely essential in memories. And when we have brain imaging scans of people who do memory tasks, we see activity in the hippocampal area. The front lobe has language centers and are shown to be active when processing verbal information. So this can tie into memory and language here. We find that procedural memory must lie outside these areas. All right, and that is it. Please study the note cards. Those are the things that will be on the test. Remember that homework is OpenNote, OpenBook, Open PowerPoint, you name it, you got it. We just want to help you remember and get those elaborative rehearsals in so you can build those connections to remember to do well on the tests.